Hey guys, welcome back to the Mike Urban Show. Today I have Elijah D'Souza. He is the you're the founder of Citizens Against Eversource, correct?
Yes.
You have around over 30,000 members, right?
Around 31 and counting.
31 and counting. It's just growing, right?
Absolutely.
And then you're also, it says here, an estimator for VAS Construction.
Yes, estimator for VAS Construction out of New Bedford. Been around for about 20 years. We do fantastic work.
That's great. And then I have my colleague, Annie Yang, with me today, and she's going to assist me during this podcast. We're gonna light it up today. I'll tell you what, it's going to be crazy.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to ask you a couple questions. All right, tell me the inception of this. Like, how did this happen? How did this start? How did you get to the position that you're in?
Well, like I said, we mentioned that I am an estimator for a local construction company, and I typically peruse the community groups to find work, right? To find leads, similar to the way you do as far as real estate. And I started noticing a trend, right? Which is people posting their bills. And, in America, we typically don't post our dirty laundry, right? We all create this facade of everything's perfect, everything's happy, and there's nothing wrong in our lives. And, this was an aberration of sorts to see those bills pop up. And they started popping up rather frequently. Even the narratives within these collective groups all consistently changed. And I'm in multiple of those groups, and it was throughout. And so I says, wait a minute, what's going on here? So I said, let me, and then I opened my bill.
That was enough.
I was like, wait a minute, I see what they're talking about now. And my bill went up probably about 100% within 6 months, which is insane. And for the most part of us, we didn't really look at our bills before. We got the bill, we paid it, and that was
it's on auto pay, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. There's no arguing with the city hall. But in this scenario, it's like, what is going on here? Something insane is going on. And I said, let's get to the bottom. Let's see how deep this goes, right? And that's why I created a group, to see how widespread this was. And as soon as I created it was hundreds of joiners and hundreds of members within the first day, like 500 the second day, and it just kept going on and on and on. And, to the one point we were about 1,500 a day. And I will say there's a direct correlation between the growth rate of the group and the level of desperation felt by Massachusetts residents. And so, it's sad. It's sad that we're in this position, but I'm glad that we've been awakened to this scenario, and now we can start, sorting it through and figuring out what we can do to change it.
And that's what I want to touch on next. So I think both you and I are in a pretty unique position, meaning that we've been trying to advocate for the public, right? And we're trying to see what we could do. And as you know, Mara Healy has been trying to, create different things where, you're getting $50 pretty soon, and probably paying it back tenfold by the end of the year. But, what do you think, I guess to ask you the question, beside what we're doing, how do you think that we can make a correction to what's happening with our energy here?
Well, I mean, that's a pretty wide question, but I think knowledge is power, right, at the end of the day.
Yeah. And
we mentioned previously that we didn't know about what was going on behind the scenes. So I think the first thing is to identify our enemy, right? And, so that we can better fight our opponent. And, come to find out that initially I created a group as Citizens Against Eversource, but as I dug through, I'm like, okay, I understand Eversource is a monopoly, right? But it's a regulated monopoly. It's allowed. Okay, allowed by who? Why isn't this antitrust? Well, it's allowed by Massachusetts, right? They've been allowed to get to the status that they've gotten to. The thing is, though, Massachusetts has the burden or the responsibility of regulating them. But they're not. And so where is the problem there within that fail-safe, right? And so you come to find out that the DPU, is the Department of Public Utility, has a responsibility of regulating them. The EEA also oversees them.
Now, who's the EEA? That's somebody that I've never heard of.
Well, that's...
what does that stand for?
That's a good question. As far as... There's so many acronyms within this.
Within that's this okay. There, it's probably energy something, right?
Energy something. Okay. And, the
Are they part of Massachusetts, or is this a national...
They are part of Massachusetts.
Okay.
Yeah, they are part of Massachusetts, and it's Mrs. Cooper, I believe, who is the primary administrator there. And then above that sort of checks and balances, there is the Attorney General, right, who also oversees these things and sort of tries to protect ratepayers, right, because that's part of her cachet.
Yeah, that ain't working.
Or it's supposed to be.
Not working.
No, it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, there's been massive, dereliction of duty amongst all these three governing bodies.
Yes.
And so what do you do when your governing bodies fail you? What do you do when the legislature fails you? What do you do when, citizens are screaming at the top of their lungs for, some sort of reprieve? And, you look to the legislature, Maura Healey, and the best she can do is hit you with a 5% plus interest.
That's it.
And then when she notices the public wants to kind of kick back a little bit, you know what? Let's make it 10% discount. But it's not a discount.
What do you mean by plus interest?
So initially, Maura Healey came out with the first rollout, right? Because, public pressure does do something. And so our groups and our collectives, they do hear us, not because they care about us, but because they care about maintaining their power. They care about maintaining their dynasties and their legacies and things of that nature, and their bank accounts and their golden parachutes and their seats on these commissions once they retire, right? They sit on these boards for Eversource, and we know how that all works, right? And so first, when she felt that public pressure, she rolled out with, we're going to give you a 5%. They called it a reduction, which is amazing how these people do this. They're really good at the nomenclature, right? They'll say just enough not to get sued, but enough that it sounds really good. And so they called it a reduction, but it was truly a deferment. It was 5% deferred to these these warmer months, right? Where we wouldn't feel it. So they said, all right, we're going to give you 5% off your bills now. You guys are going to pay it in about 3 months.
But they're just shifting.
They're shifting it, but they called it a reduction. But the thing is, there was interest attached to this deferment. And as soon as that came out, I looked in the chat and people were like, yes, this is not much, but she's doing something. I says, no, she's not. I'm about to pull out my hair. I'm like, no, she's not. Did you guys read this thing? I was like, this is a slap in the face. I'm like, she wants to make money off of this. They're going to make more money off this. This is insane. I just, oh my God. And so as soon as I said that, whatever, it kind of, people were like, wait a minute, this is true. I had some news reporters come out and they're like, what do you think about this? She's really trying here. I said, what are you talking about? She's really trying. And of course, if we want to talk about the media, that's another ball of wax altogether as far as what they're allowed to say, what they're allowed to air and things of that nature. But anyways, her narrative quickly changed, and I'm referring to Maura Healey, Darth Vader there, to let's give them 10% now, right? Now it was 10%, but they called it a reduction again, but still deferred payment. So they're not doing anything.
Plus interest.
But now only one company initially said we're still going to do the interest, which was National Grid. And then when the public outrage continued, wait a minute, they're still doing the interest. And then they fell off and said, okay, we'll just let you guys, do the payment plan, which is what they've been trying to funnel us into this whole entire time. And so they act like they're doing something, but really, they if you're familiar with marketing and sales and things of that nature, it's called funneling, right? It's you get the people to go exactly where you're supposed to go, and you only have to do that when you're selling a bill of bad goods, right? Because when you're selling something honest and truthful and a good product, you don't have to do any of that because people want to buy it. But they have to be deceptive because what they're selling is, a blatant trap. And so what they want us to be in is in these payment plans where they stretch out our payments. And so, there's the effect of we don't feel them as much. It doesn't feel as bad. And they're allowed to sort of jack things up how they choose to, because she's thinking, well, a year and a half from now, I may be running for president. I may be running, for a senatorial seat. And so I won't be here. So I'm going to do whatever I can to, rip these guys off while I'm here. Let's spread it out. Let's spread it out into a payment plan. By the time they realize it, I'm gone, and it'll be the next person's problem. And so, these are the kind of things that this administration does. And, for the most part, a lot of these political leaders, they sell us, these things as being positive for us. But when you really dig deep, they're positive for them and their true constituents, which are their donors.
100%. And we see that all the time when it happens in political elections, right? Like, one thing that I actually had this conversation earlier today, and a lot of these politicians are aligned, and the policies that they make and the bills that they write, a lot of this stuff is solely done because of the influence of the parties that are donating to them, or the people that are donating to them, or the corporation that's donating to them. And then what happens is, they feel this level of obligation to said company or business or organization or advocacy group, whatever it is. And what ends up happening is it ends up really splitting the people that they're supposed to serve. You know what I'm saying? And then we're the ones that are left stuck paying these exorbitant bills or whatever it may be. It's ridiculous to me, and it really, it's amazing that we're even sitting here having this podcast about this, because if the chain reaction of what we've been trying to accomplish never happened, I don't think that the news would have picked up on it. I also don't think that we would have seen any action at all. Now, as you said, I think that having some levels of action, even though the 5% reduction plus interest or whatever they're trying to shift the buck, right? It's better. Yes, it is better than nothing. But the fact is, the people had an impact. Right, well, and I think that's the key here.
I will say that 5 and 10%, that's basically tantamount to an admission of guilt.
Correct.
That's all that was.
Correct.
And they're still trying to spin their narratives and give us as little as possible. And then we come up now that we're in a situation where it says, all right, I'm gonna create a savings program, and here's $50. Don't spend it all in one place.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know if we have families here, but I mean, a family of 4, you can't afford to go to Burger King on $50 anymore.
It's nuts.
And so, what is that? Meanwhile, on the other end, they're giving Mass Save $4.5 billion.
Correct.
That we're all going to be paying for the next 3 years, and so they do this magician trick where they show you one hand, hey, look, look, in the meanwhile, they're robbing you in your pockets, robbing you blind with the other hand.
Do you know how much Mass Save? So let's talk about the bills a little bit. All right, we'll get into the thick of it. On the bills portion, at least here in Massachusetts, there's almost 2 portions of the bill, right? You have your usage portion, and then you have your delivery portion. Within the delivery portion, there's multiple fees that are in that delivery portion. One of them is Mass Save.
Absolutely.
Do you know what the percentage is that they are charging the public in terms of Mass Save?
It's upwards of 30%.
That's what I thought. I was going to say that too. So you have the same information I do. It's around 30%, but it's not 30% on the total. Is it 30% on the total?
It's 30% based on the amount of usage.
Is that what it is? It's 30% of the usage. So where's all that money going?
And that's
does anybody know?
And like I said, that's a good question. I will say, being in the construction field and having, used Mass Save, in the past, and, thinking that they were doing, something good, you come to realize that there are a lot of holes within that system.
Correct.
I have some members that have spoken to me about, hey, I have had Mass Save at my house, and I just had a new water heater put in, and they come in because I'm feeling the draft, so I really want them to insulate, and they turn around to me and say, listen, there's nothing we need to insulate here, but you do need a new water heater. And and they turn around and say, a new water heater, but they humor them, right? Well, okay, how much is that? Well, it's going to be $30,000. And she just got her water heater replaced for around $5,000,
which is crazy.
When? Like a year ago?
Probably a couple months before they came there, and so for them to say she needed a new water heater, and this is a person that consistently, she does everything in her house. She's very apt with construction and etc. So she was playing dumb and playing possum a little bit there. And when they said 30,000, well, wouldn't you know, the threshold, the allowance by Mass Save per customer at the time was 30,000. And so they're doing whatever they can to suck up all that money. And so we know that there's no oversight, or not enough oversight.
Yes.
We know that in regards to these companies, these contractors aren't trained properly. We know that there's nobody auditing them, right?
They also can't speak to the media.
Absolutely, that's part of their contract.
That's part of their contract,
and they can't speak to each other in regards to prices as well either. That's part of their contract, and that's that brings us down another rabbit hole where some of these contractors are unable to work in particular areas because they've been bid so low by these shadow companies, and just when they decide to leave an area because they either go bankrupt or they can't afford to provide Mass Save services in that area, along comes these big companies like a Homeworks, right, or like a Revive, and now they take over the market and they're able to set whatever prices they want because there's no competition, because it's based on the lowest bidder. And when you eliminate all the other bidders, well, now you get to set the market rate.
That's
and so,
crazy.
you know, and I have a whistleblower report that was sent to me in regards to Mass Save and in regards to, you know, some other things like the storm damage and how they manage. And these people are people that work within these programs, work within Eversource, work within National Grid, but, you know, unwilling to speak on the record. Unfortunately, I was ready to put them, you know, behind a camera and a curtain, and you know, but they're, you know, afraid of losing their jobs. And like I said, I've been begging other people to come forward, and I have contractors and all different walks of life coming forward with different stories here and there. And I just been collecting that in a site called, it's an email called Mass Save Money Laundering Proof at gmail.com. So that's a lot of words. So it's Mass Save Money Laundering Proof at gmail.com. And I challenge people to, if any experiences that you had with Mass Save that seem very questionable, to go on there and explain to me, give me a testimonial of your experience, show me any invoices they might have left that might have backed it up, any pictures you could provide. And we're collecting a database there to just basically see what we can do once we have all that data collected, and see what we can do to fight back.
Well, I'll tell you this much. If they're getting 30 grand for changing out a hot water heater, I am in the wrong business. There's no doubt about it, because that is insane. What's a water heater? $1,200 for material?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I can see like 4,000, whatever, for the labor and et cetera. 4,000 or 5,000, whatever. But where is that 25 grand going?
Right.
You know, and that's the question. And all these contractors that have been prioritized, have been allowed to take over particular markets, you know, who are they giving kickbacks to, you know?
Correct.
Because, you know, nothing is free, you know, in this world. And when they're able to get that almost monopolistic dominance within a particular territory, you know, you got to pay a price for that, you know, and it's just
right. So people would expect to save about, if they, now this is just, you know, pipe dream. If the Mass Save program was eliminated from the delivery portion of the bill, and they're charging 30% based on the usage, people could save a significant amount of money. And the other thing is, do you even know what they do? Like, is there ever any money left over in Mass Save? Like, does it roll over? Like, what happens?
So there was some monies left over, you know, in the previous budget, and that's what they used for that $50 they gave us.
Oh, okay.
So
they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. Yeah.
There's still more. There's still more left. There's still some more left. But they're basically using those funds there. And I will say, as far as those funds, they're saying they're going to give that to us, you know, over the course of, I believe, 5 years, right? I believe $125 million was what that $50 came out to. And so over 5 years, it comes out to close to a little bit over $500 million, right? Yeah. In that respect. And what is $500 million to them? It's basically what we were able to save when they lowered their $5 billion proposal for Mass Save to $4.5 billion. Right. There's a funny story in that too, as far as how that ended up happening. Go ahead. So basically what happened is, you know, I just got into this, of course, right? We just found out about all these issues and et cetera. And so in the middle of the night, I'm just kind of surfing the web, you know, looking for little things. And I see, you know, I just found out about the DPU website. And so there's a DPU website where these utilities company have to petition for anything that they want, right? Any kind of rate increase, or if they want to retrieve some storm damage costs incurred by them, and et cetera, they file a petition with the DPU. Now, this website is very boring. It almost looks archaic, like the old, you know, computers you would use at the library. And I think that's intentional, you know, because they want you to get on there and just be so confused that you just leave. And I truly think
it wasn't made for you.
No.
It was not made for the general public.
No, and it's kind of sort of hidden away, like a hidden little archive, and it said, and we stumbled across it. You could also go on the www and you look at Eversource and you look up hearings and petitions, right? Or National Grid hearings and petitions. And there will be petition announcements on your Eversource sites, on your National Grid sites, that they file with the DPU. So that's part of the game there. They have to announce it there, and it'll also be listed on the DPU site. And so you can find them that way. If you do have those, you can look that up. Whatever other utility you may have in Massachusetts, you can look up your utility name, hearings and petitions, and you can find that. And you can find which ones are coming up, which I challenge people to do, because I cannot look at everything. They're bombarding us from every which way. And so if people do find them on their own and post within the group, that's going to help us, because now we have a target to aim at. But back to the Mass Save thing. In the middle of the night, we did find out that they were going to, you know, vote on this $5 billion proposal. And in the middle of the night, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
So I put out this, I look back on it now, I'm like, I look insane, just screaming at the top of my lungs. But that's how I felt at the time, because it's like, we don't know about these things. And $5 billion,
correct,
that's a lot of money. And if you can imagine how much it's going to add to your bill. One important fact about that is that they pitched to us that they reduced it. They're going to save us money. But the reality is they were going for $5 billion. The previous budget for 3 years was $4 billion.
Correct.
So when they went for that $5 billion, which is 25% more than $4 billion, they were actually going to increase our burden through those fees by 25%. And then when, there was a lot of public outrage, of course, about it. I said, we gotta have a emergency protest outside of the DPU. Where is this place? Whatever, right? So I'm blaring at the top of my lungs and ended up putting all these flyers out in the middle of the night. I'm talking about for like 24 hours. I'm posting protest on every Boston news media site I can see. Maura Healey pages, legislative pages. I'm just blasting that out there everywhere because I want people to see it, right? Everybody that's migrating there. And so we get there the day of, and there's 10 cameras, not too many people, but at the end of the day, when we tried to get the DPU inside the DPU to file our ceremonial complaints, we weren't allowed in, right? I guess there's a process to be able to get into that building. It's on the 3rd floor via elevator and et cetera. There's a security guard, very nice. But we were able to call them on the phone that day, and they told us, we're home. I'm like, what do you mean you're home? Like, we're home because of you. I'm like, what do you mean by that? Well, it's like, we heard that there was going to be some angry protesters here, an angry mob, and they were going to try to rush the building, and so they had us all work from home.
Oh, so they're kind of scared of another January 6th Capitol riot happening again because of angry citizens.
But that was further proof to me that the DPU knows how upset the public is, and that's publicly, to me, that's tantamount to publicly admitting that the citizens don't want you to vote for that.
Yeah.
If you're so scared that you think people are going to run in there, hey, listen, they don't want this passed. As much as we might want it, as much as our legislature want it, and I've been told by the people at the DPU, listen, it's not us. Look at your legislators. They put their arm on us. They make us do these things. And I said, yeah, but your main tenet is
they make them. The legislators make the DPU do this.
Absolutely, 100%. And like I said, the gentleman that I spoke to, he did not want to be on the record, of course, because he literally said to me,
but he works for the DPU.
Job. He does work for the DPU, and he said, I need my job. And I completely understand that, and that's how they pretty much have us, is by the short and curlies. The people that are in a position to be able to expose these things are unable to, because they all have us by our livelihoods, right? By our inability to be able to survive without that sustenance, without that
I call that
finances.
golden handcuffs.
And
Absolutely.
they are now
That's what it
soldiers
is.
for the state.
Absolutely, and we see it in different avenues. But I thought the cool part was that as small as the collective was that was there, we had tons of news cameras, and they ended up lowering it $500 million. And I like to always say, look at us. There really wasn't too many people there at all. But if a small collective
How many people were there to the point that it got it lowered by $500 million?
I will say there was probably, honestly, like 7 or 8 people there.
Yeah.
But, which is beautiful in a way, because 7 or 8 people raised enough eyebrows for 10 cameras to show up, right? The DPU, a state entity, to stay home, to change their order of operations, and then on the other end, to lower it by $500 million. I mean, if that isn't saying something about the power of the people and our ability to form collectives and to scream and to lash out and to create change within the system, I mean, that was beautiful in itself.
That's a conversation I had with Mike. We were wondering if we're making a difference, and I told
we talk
Mike,
about that a lot.
It only takes a handful of very committed people to make the change we're seeking.
Absolutely.
That's really wild. But I'm wondering how DPU got the tip. I bet there's somebody in your group that's a little bit of a whistleblower themselves.
No. When I tell you, I stayed up all night. Like I did not sleep, and I'm posting on Maura Healey's site, and I have my protest.
Yeah.
And they're looking at my angry video, like, look at this guy. He's pissed. I don't know what people are behind him. He's got 25,000 people in the group at the time.
25,000 people in the group, but only 7 to 8 people show up.
Well, here's the thing, and here's the catch-22, right?
Yeah.
You know, this was on a working day, right? And
Right.
we represent the working class.
Right.
And unfortunately, you know, they got us in a situation where we can't even afford to take a day off work because that's 20% of your weekly income, right?
Right.
And the difference that'll make to a growing family, especially with these insane electric bills and insane gas bills. And so, you know, even missing that one day of work, and of course, it was within 36 hours notice that from when I found
Sure.
out to when the protest is. And like I said, if you're going to plan these things, you have kids, you have this, and
God.
et cetera. But, you know, so a lot of people really cannot afford to come, especially on short notice, you know, so.
But that's the plan. That is the
100%.
plan, to make things so expensive that you can only keep working and then you don't have the time to think about important things like this.
And like I said, I say it all the time. You know, they pretended to abolish slavery a long time ago, and they didn't. They just shifted it to everybody on society now. And so,
Yeah,
you know,
that's
instead
a
of
good way
just
to put it.
enslaving African Americans, now we're going to enslave the entirety of the population.
Yeah. What it could one thing I wanted to ask you is that was there ever an audit for DPU or for Eversource? Like, has that ever happened?
So, you know, Eversource being a private company, I'm sure there are independent audits that they hold themselves, you know, as part of their responsibility to the shareholders and things of that nature. But as far as the DPU, there isn't much except for, you know, things that are done by maybe the Attorney General and things of that nature. But those reports aren't really exactly extensive in how far they dive into the records, and they had their own agendas, right? Like, for instance, you know, Attorney General Troy Campbell, who doesn't do anything to support the ballot initiative that we passed at a rate of 72%, and now is, you know, pushed forward and begged by 80% of voters want to have that audit. You know, so these people have their own agendas. You know, they're completely indifferent to the law, and you know, they will ceremonially do things to, you know, put up a show and look, I'm auditing them. Here I am.
Yeah.
But then in the end, you know, it's a fruitless audit because they're really not looking, and it's just to dissuade the voters and dissuade the people from more outrage.
What do you think needs to be done realistically? This is a real question, to lower the bills. Like, why? Well, actually, let's start here. Why are they so high?
Well, like I
Besides
said,
the mass save, what else?
So there are a lot of state mandated fees, and the majority of why they're high is a lot of these state mandated fees, whether it's solar, whether it's revenue decoupling, which, I mean, we can do a segment on each show on each one of these. The net meter, fee, which is.
Sure.
Yeah, like I said, are you familiar with the net?
Let the people know.
So basically, the net meter recovery fee is basically when, you know, say you have solar and they tell you, hey, listen, if you produce too much solar, it's okay. We're going to sell that, you know, back to your neighbors and things of that nature.
Yes.
And we're going to pay you for it, okay? Now, the thing is, what they don't tell you is that, you know, let's just use a benign example. Say you pay $1 per, you know, kilowatt hour of energy, right?
You pay?
No, let's say,
Like-
just say you
Just the
do. Let's
public.
just say you pay. A general public pays $1, right? Theoretically, right? They're gonna, and when you produce 1 kilowatt hour, they're only gonna pay you, let's say, 20 cents for it. They're still gonna
So they
turn
take
around
an
and
80%
sell
cut
that.
out of that.
They're still gonna sell that for the $1. So they did nothing to produce that. They're just taking what you have and selling it to your neighbor at a profit. Now, not only do they sell that as a profit, they're going to charge everybody and their mother a 7% fee for doing that. And that 7% is based on your usage. So everybody right now is paying 7% extra on their bill for that
For the
transaction.
administrative
For the administrative costs.
of doing this kind of program.
Absolutely. From saying, hey, we're going to take your energy and give it to him. They're not only making that insane profit, they're charging everybody that 7% is huge.
Yeah.
And
It's
not
almost
just doing
10%.
On the usage side.
They're already
that's all-
profiting,
that's
and they want to
insane.
take it as they're already profiting with the 80%.
7%, because they do so much with that. And mind you, right, the
Okay.
grid isn't really built for having all that extra energy. Like that's
Right.
another part of it. And so, you know, if you as a homeowner that were promised this need need at Eversource's request to say, oh, listen, you're producing too much energy. I know we said we're going to pay you for it. We're going to give you pennies on a dollar. But by the way, you're overloading the grid there in your area, so you have to buy a transformer. Yeah, you're going to have to do that, and that's going to be somewhere between $4,500 to $5,500, and so that's something else. Another thing they don't tell you, and so they package these things up as
What if
savings.
you refuse to do that?
That's a good question. But the thing is, they already have you in a chokehold because they already have you, with the 20-year commitment to your solar panels. You're paying X amount per month for your lease, or you already took a $50,000 loan to pay for your panels outright. And so, your house is already fully wired for. And so you really can't say no. It's basically like the energy mafia. In Maura Healey is the Al Capone in that scenario.
Okay.
The Green New Deal. We're living it, baby.
Like, listen, you're going to take what we're going to give you, because if you don't, some bad things are going to happen to you.
It's crazy.
It sounds like...
You know what? And as we hinted on in the beginning of this, like, most people have this stuff on auto pay. They're not even paying attention to these things. And it's really a disservice to the general public to have, I mean, you've seen the bills, $1,500, $1,200, like, and their heat's set at 60. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, people are living this, they're living well below their means, and they still have to pay these crazy fees. And do you think that a lot of this has to do, so what would have happened? So a lot of the electricity we get from Canada, right?
Some of it. There are only some states that get it. Probably about 4 states that get the electricity from Canada.
Where does the electricity, where is it coming from? Like, how is Eversource getting the electricity here? Where is that getting generated to come to Massachusetts?
So there are some plants that do get it within their regional plants.
Yes.
There are some in the United States, and that's where the majority of it comes from. As far as those service plants. But only 4 states get it from Canada. And so
only
that
4?
was a misnomer. That was something that Maura Healey was trying to use to shift the blame onto Trump in regards to the tariffs, as far as to why things were going to increase for everybody. And that's what they do. They're just back to the magician tricks and just shifting the blame, from themselves and their policies that they pass legislation for, and shifting it onto somebody else.
Do you think if that gas pipeline came through New York and into Massachusetts, we would have cheaper bills?
100%. But the thing about the state is, they're clever. If they have something they're going to want to do, they're always going to want to funnel you. And so what they'll do is they'll just increase the delivery fees for the gas. They'll just hit you with more state mandated fees and say, oh, well, this isn't really clean. This is really bad for the environment. And so we're going to have to hit it with some fees, guys, that are going to be used for, cleaning things up and infrastructure and things of that nature. And nobody knows where all this money goes. Nobody. So they will funnel you out of gas with the fees. And so their initiative is to be fully electric by 2050,
which is crazy.
Which is insane.
Yes,
it's absolutely insane. You got people that 5 years ago were given stipends from the government to go oil and to do all these different things, and and I've talked to a lot of these people within the group there, and they're like, well, I just had this all completed. You're telling me that within 20-25 years they're going to try to push. Imagine the electric prices we have now, and imagine not having any options. Imagine fully electric vehicles being plugged into your house. Imagine what that's going to cost. And we see that the cost of living keeps rising, but what people are getting paid is not.
Correct.
And so, I mean, what's the end game here? What's the end game here? We know that she knows she's only going to be in office for the next year and a half, at the very least, right? So I think there is no end game for them. I think it's a cash grab. I think they're just trying to grab as much as they can. Like, when you go into one of those ball pits and there's prizes, there's money everywhere, and they're just grabbing as much as you can. And that's what she's doing right now, Maura Healey.
Wait, here's what I'm not understanding. It's a cash grab for her. How is she personally invested in this?
Because like I said,
personally earning money as an individual from this.
So and basically how the political system works is it's favor for favor, right? And it's basically, we're going to finance your campaign, and then when you get in, you do X, Y, Z, right? Beyond that, there are 2 teams, right? There is the blue team, there's the red team. If you're the red team, you need to get money. If you're the blue team, you need to get money. Well, who can the red team get money from? It's going to be gas and oil, right? Who can the blue team get money from? It's going to be wind and solar and the clean initiatives. And so there are only certain donors when you announce yourself as blue or red, where you can get your money from. And that's just how the game goes, right? And so, I've spoken to some people, and some people have said, oh, nobody runs as independent. Nobody can run as an independent because you won't make it in the state. So already you're pigeonholed into either picking red or blue. So if you pick red, you have to go with those guys and get your money from them. And if you go blue, you have to go get your money from them. And so, that's how the game is played, and the system is in place, and anybody who wants to join the political spectrum has to play by those rules because they need finances, and a lot of these campaigns costs, for instance, some of these guys here spent upwards of $1 million for a senatorial campaign, and who has that, and so they have these donors, and because there are only those two teams, and we have a two-party system, and they're these groups are already separated as far as their ideologies are already separated, whether that's abortion on one side and gun rights on the other, and all these different lobbies, they already have their sides preset. So when you say, listen, I'm going to run as a red, you have all these people that are going to finance you, and now you owe them favors, right? Imagine if somebody on the blue side says, oh, I'm going to pump this gas line, and they would lose a portion of their base, because they've vilified the other side so much that they've got all these people convinced that, well, gas is bad, or this is bad, or that is bad. But at the end of the day, it's never to them about the ideological pursuit. They could care less whether you use solar, whether you use gas. It's about them making their money and making their ends meet, and making sure they have the campaign dollars to keep their power by keeping their seats.
It's really a shame, and that's what we touched about in the beginning. It's they have this level of obligation, right, to whatever side that they choose, and then what ends up happening is they owe them the favors, and then they get the favors on the back end. It's as simple as that. And we're the ones that are paying for those favors. It's effectively what it is. And it's really a disservice to the general public. And one thing that I wanted to ask you in regards to the 2050 goal for total electric. So I spoke with Leo Gabriel, I think it was last week or the week before, about this. And he was an electrical engineer. And, if you're getting, this is the way he kind of put it, we were talking, if you're solely just electric, right, and you're not, let's say you're going deep there, but you're not going out wider, meaning here's propane, here's coal, here's oil, here's natural gas, and you're just solely dependent on electric, how could the state itself, how could we sustain ourselves when we're not producing enough to begin with? Like, where are they going to put all these wind farms? Think about it. Where are they going to go?
Well, and here's the thing.
It's crazy.
Nobody knows what they're going to do, but you can be sure that you're going to pay for it.
Don't you think that I always think about this stuff, like, don't you think they have to have some, like, predictive, like, analytics or like some, something to predict, like, if we do, we start with, or we do this will happen. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't they have to have some metrics when they're looking at these things? Or some data, right?
They do, but the data is, in many ways fabricated by their own NGOs.
Right.
And so, the validity of that data is speculative to begin with, because they're the ones that are
You're pulling it out of thin air.
And they're paying for the analysis in the same way, some of these pharmaceutical companies do. And they'll have, 3 studies, but they only will publish the one that gives them the favorable results. It's the same kind of way. And so, this climate bill that we're talking about that came out quite some time ago, and the thing is that this was pre-COVID, right? So they had this goal based on the economy then, and et cetera, and they made the numbers work, and the numbers were certainly
fuzzy math.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and they, so that was their justification. And so, but then we had 2021 and COVID and businesses shutting down and the economy shrinking and inflation and losing value in the dollar. And so, and even economic thresholds have changed as far as poverty guidelines, within the community, but they haven't changed significantly enough to truly, embody what the current situation is in a lot of these families, as far as, how much discretionary income they have left, and et cetera, or disposable income that they do have left.
Sure.
And so the question is, have you adjusted these economic thresholds to account for COVID and everything that happened? So if you created a plan in whatever it was, 2018 or whatever it was, and you're projecting that to 2050, have you changed that plan based on what we experienced, the calamity, the crisis the economic travesty we experienced in 2021? Right. And it hasn't. That's been still the same. That's still the target. And that's, economically irresponsible. Yeah. And I mean, I think anybody, you don't need a math degree to figure that out, that if something happens within that formula, something changes, you need to adjust the whole equation. And if your goal is the green goal, well, your population and the economic sovereignty and the economic stability should be, something that you qualify within this equation. And so they're obviously not doing that. They don't want to do that because, like I said, their only goals are driving the bus forward, and they don't care who they run over, on their way to this bogus plan.
The funny thing about it, I actually think that the reason that this happened, it wasn't just the cost, because when you're looking at your bill and you have the usage side and the delivery side, sometimes that delivery side is like double the usage. Sometimes it's triple the usage.
Yes.
What could we do is there anything that could be done to get the delivery down? Like what else can be possibly done?
Well, and like I said, it always goes back to identifying your enemy, right? And what we're doing now is collecting knowledge. We're all collectively trying to figure this out. But nobody knows, why is my neighbor's delivery charge 2 times as much as my supply? Why is my other neighbor's only 1 time as much?
Wait, it's all different?
Yes.
It's different. It's different.
So the data I gave for you isn't even...
It's somewhat relevant, but it's like, we don't know. It's supposed to be based on a percentage of the usage, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And that math is, again, not adding up on all the bills.
Wait, but even your next door neighbor, it's different?
Absolutely.
It's not based on like your zip code or your street or your town?
Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Nobody knows. And that's, part of the discovery phase that we would want, as far as trying to understand their algorithms, right? And what is being used to what is even being used to justify why his is 2 to 1 and his is 1 to 1,
That's not good. You know why? Because if you want to target someone that you politically do not agree with, let's say they don't like Mike.
Hey. Don't be throwing out ideas. Soon the lights are going to shut off in here. You never know.
You can bankrupt any individual you want with an electric bill.
Absolutely. And then to the point that, their electricity is shut off. They can't even plug in their electric cars to go to their AI job down the street somewhere.
That's another good point. Like AI, I think one thing that they may not have attributed to, let's say this 2050, all electric thing, and I touched on this a little bit once before. I was looking up some modeling based on the amount of electricity use these data centers for AI is pulling. And if we continue down the road, and let's hypothetically say things don't get substantially more energy efficient in these data centers, the data centers are drawing a ton of electricity.
Oh, yeah.
And if you decide, let's just say half of the country is going to be electric, the other half in the red states, they're going to be on natural gas. Well, I'll tell you what, I know where I'm moving, right? Because if we're all on electric and then you have these data centers pulling all of this out of the grid, it's only going to drive the cost up. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and God forbid, let's say we were to get an EMP, in this area, and now it's complete
I didn't even
darkness,
think of that. That actually happened. Something wasn't there some flooding somewhere that, God, I can't remember if it was at the Cape. You're right about that. So what you're talking about is if you're all electric and there's a natural disaster, you're in trouble.
And think about an EMP from a national security standpoint. We're right on the coast, right? We got California on one coast, California on the other. What happens if there is this true threat from Russia or from China or whoever it is? It's not nationalistically responsible in that respect. And so, I think we're all on the same page that a multi-pronged energy solution would be the way to go in regards to, having variety, and it entices competition, within the markets and within these industries and et cetera. And so they sort of act as checks and balances to each other. Hey, convert to gas, we're cheaper. But when you just leave it at one specific, mode of energy, you create a situation where it's certain disaster for the residents within that given area.
100%. So your group, how many? You have 32,000, 33,
we're close
35?
to 32,000. Maybe by the end of this podcast,
crazy.
We might have 32 there.
What else, if you don't mind sharing this, I'm going to ask, what else behind the scenes are you guys trying to advocate for? What are you trying to do in order to empower the public? What are you trying to do even on a political standpoint? Have you drafted or working with drafting bills or some policies? Has anything like that happened yet?
So we have drafted a ballot initiative, right? And so basically that's getting a question on the ballot, right? And this ballot initiative is based on energy, and it's basically a Consumer Protection Act for energy. Senator Kelly Dooner also has, a bill that she put up that's in regards to some of the things that we do have within our ballot initiative. There are a lot of other things, and I won't get too deep right now as far as the specificity within that, because it's an ever-evolving situation, because we're still discovering who our enemies are and how
we're trying to figure this out as we go, right?
and even discovering the political game. Like, for instance, you put a ballot initiative, it passes by 72%, and then the legislature says, we're not going to honor that. We have a democracy when we feel like it. We just don't do it. And so understanding the type of loophole blockers you have to put into the wording of these as well. So you basically have to be a constitutional lawyer to understand how to write these things in a way that the legislature can't back out of them. And who knows, the slippery little snakes over there. And they try to find any way, which how they almost challenging us now. Almost they've grown brazen and emboldened, with these moves, almost as if to say, what are you going to do about it? What are you guys going to do about it? They've really grown to believe that, and I think it's very important that we remind them that we pay their bills, that we pay their checks, that we own them, that we put them there, and we can take them out. And so when we talk about what we're going to do, it's not only creating a ballot initiative. And why are we doing a ballot initiative? We have a petition now that has about 15,000 signatures on it, but who's going to listen to it? Is it
How
going to be
many do you need?
Well, at the end of the day, what a petition does is you'll take it to one of your legislatures and say, hey, listen, we got all these people from multiple districts that want you to put a bill across. He says, all right, great. Right? And if he needs the publicity at the time, if he has a bad track record, if there's some bad PR, he might say, all right, let me write this bill, right? Let me write this bill for you guys. He writes the bill and it sits there in the cemetery, in purgatory, because, House Speaker there, Mariano, only puts up what he wants to. And so there's the political game there, right, where just getting a bill to the floor for a vote is troublesome, right? Like I said, Senator Kelly Dooner, she's going on these media campaigns to try to get her bill to go for a vote, right? And she's trying to build public knowledge about it so that they can advocate, because if enough public pressure goes out there, they might ceremonially put it up there. All right, let's vote on it, guys. Hey, guys, what are you going to vote? Yeah, we're going to vote no. We're going to vote no. And then some of them, one or two of them might say, I really need the votes for this next election. I'm going to vote yes, guys. You mind if I vote yes? And, they'll do that ceremoniously. Those games do exist where, certain ones within the blue side or the red side, will be allowed to vote against what the collective wants, just to put a good show on and make the people think that they're really on their side. And then at the end of the day, hey, you did all that, you got all those signatures, you finally got it up there, Mariano allowed it, oh, hail Mariano there, and then, it gets cast down. And so you did all that for nothing, because in the end, it's the illusion that the people have a say, because they've plainly told you in many different ways that, we're going to do what we want to do, and you're going to pay for it, and there's nothing you can do about it. And this isn't a call to action. If we just kind of protract this, 1 year, 2 years, there's a 43% hike already on the books for November 2025. 43% on top of what we have now. Am I hearing
this right? November 2025? You're saying like...
Oh, yeah, it's already in the books there. They're already talking about 43% as far as an increase. The May increase, last I checked, because there's going to be a May 1st increase as well, hadn't been determined yet. They were going to figure that out, because what ended up happening is, after one of the biggest rate hikes ever in Massachusetts history on November 1st came out, right, that 25 to 30% for Eversource, the 12 to 17% for National Grid. On November 14th, S-2967 was passed by the legislature, which is another infrastructure bill. And so that got passed, signed by Maura Healey on November 20th. And that's going to add to our payments, right? Because we pay for all their growth as a private company that we get nothing from as far as benefits. We're going to pay for their expansion, right? We're going to pay for their maintenance. And in the end, we get nothing but higher rates, but whatever. That's just another day in Massachusetts under the Maura Healey administration. So this May 1st hike that's coming up, that's yet to be determined, because they're yet figuring out how much to hike it based on that bill that was passed. So it's going to be hitting us April, May, within those bill cycles, because they're going to figure out what they're going to hit us for. So we had that variable undetermined rate hike that's going to hit us then. Then we had the November one that's going to be around 43%. And then, of course, we have Maura's bill, H1, that's going to add more to infrastructure and that we're going to pay for as well. And so, and then if you pepper in there all these little things, the DPU, like we just had another protest, and it was in protest to 24- DPU docket number 24-158, which was basically $189 million that Eversource petitioned for what? For storm damage, for a collective of years. What do you mean? We're paying for their storm damage? Like, first of all, don't they have insurance? Second of all, it's their infrastructure. Why are we paying for it? Third of all,
we're still paying for the infrastructure, right?
Absolutely.
We're the ones that are paying for the infrastructure.
But God forbid, if you decide to create a municipality, right, within your zone, you have to buy the infrastructure from them.
Because they own the lines.
They own the lines, but we pay for them.
Yeah.
Somehow they own them.
That's crazy.
Even when we build them, even when we pay to build them, and if we want to take them back, we have to pay them for them. What kind of deal is that?
Yeah, that is the worst deal.
What kind of business arrangement is that where the public gets nothing and we end up with nothing to show for? I don't understand how that happens.
Somebody told me that DPU made, because Massachusetts did shut down a lot of ways to generate electricity. So I was, again, somewhat of a whistleblower. I was told that DPU forced Eversource, and I don't know if this is true, DPU forced Eversource to upgrade their infrastructure. And in turn, that made the cost of our bills go higher because after, let's say, Massachusetts shut down Plant 1, Plant 2, Plant 3, or whatever, they needed to upgrade their infrastructure in order to deliver the electricity from, again, Home A, Home B, and Home C. And apparently, from what they said, DPU, now I don't know if they were trying to shift the buck here, but from what I was told, DPU forced them to do that. Is that true?
And those are the processes we're actively investigating, and those stories are 100% out there. And so just in that previous meeting that there was in Plymouth, where Eversource was there to kind of help people with bills, whatever. So Eversource was actively telling the residents in Plymouth that if you guys don't do something, your energy bills are going to increase 50 to 60% within the next year or so. And basically saying that the DPU and the legislature is pushing them to do what they're doing. So, and like you said, who knows if it's passing the buck, right? At the end of the day, it seems like, when Maura came out with that 5 to 10%, she says, we're going to look into the DPU and see what they're doing, right? And then Eversource was saying, oh, it's the DPU. And then the DPU is saying, oh, it's the legislature.
Yeah. Everybody's pointing the finger.
And it's basically done purposefully so that we don't know who to collectively be upset at. And so when we're subdivided within who we want to shift the blame to, there's nothing we can actually do. And so, we're actively now pursuing those processes, right? And so as far as you mentioned, the infrastructure that the DPU is forcing onto Eversource, because there has to be a paper trail. There has to be a paper trail where Maura Healey sends, a letter out to one of her 2 appointed commissioners on the DPU, right? She appointed 2 out of 3. Charlie Baker appointed the other one. So there has to be a paper trail that they're actively shredding now as I'm speaking. That'll say that she's saying, hey, listen, guys, we got this coming up here. We need you guys to push that, Eversource is not innocent in this. I understand that their responsibility is to their shareholders. Sure. But obviously, these relationships between the DPU, the legislature, have been corrupted, right? Where they service each other, right? Say, listen, you guys, listen, we can't get a tax on these guys. They're already flipping out over this candy tax, over this, hotel tax, over this, over these excise tax we're going to raise, over these prescription taxes. They're really flipping out. So what we need you to do is we need you to put it on the delivery side. You're going to hit it in there as, as a little state mandated fee. You're not going to call it that. You're going to call it something else. You're going to call it distribution, something charge. You're going to call it net metering, something charge. We're going to allow you to do that. Because we're regulating you, we're going to let you do it. Now, what you're going to do on our end is we're gonna also, so you do for doing that for us. When you come up for that rate hike for 25 to 30%, one of the highest ever in Massachusetts, we're just going to pass it without any questions. Hopefully nobody finds out, but if it does, we'll figure it out. And if we really keep pushing, there will be heads that are going to roll, and they'll sacrifice 1 or 2 people within the collective to keep the Ponzi scheme going. Yeah. And so ultimately, a fact-finding expedition is en route now, and the more we know, the more the people are empowered. And so that's why I tell people to join the group. Watch Mike's podcast, because we're independently seeking these things out. And when we do find that smoking gun, that says, okay, Morris said this to this, and then when Eversource said this to that, to the DPU, then they approved it. When we find that true connection where we can, in court, you need exhibits, and so when we find Exhibit A and Exhibit B, and we can prove that there is corruption within these bodies, that's when there will be hell to pay. And we're close. We're close. We're right on the precipice of this.
I think so. I think that a lot is, you mentioned all those taxes and everything. I think that, what we're trying to accomplish, both you on the Eversource side and just me just bringing up these topics for the public to kind of absorb. I don't know if you feel this way, or Annie, if you feel this way too. I mean, I feel like we're really on the cusp of something here. Like, just us being here right now, the connection that we made and the way that this just happened is I think it's like proof of concept that, people here, I feel like prior to people actually standing up to what's happening, the general public did not have a voice, right? All of the news stations, as their comments turned off on YouTube, like, you can't reach out to your legislatures. You can't, you feel hopeless and powerless, right? Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, this guy's doing this over here, this guy's doing this over here, I'm doing this here, you're doing this here. Like, all of a sudden, it's like, we're all coming together, and this is what the public needs, right? Absolutely. So I feel like we're doing something that is truly going to transcend, like, everything that has been happening in Massachusetts, and hopefully pave a path for the future, right? Where the citizens have a voice, right? Absolutely. Where the citizens could advocate for themselves and their future generations. Because it's not only about us. Forget about us. What about our kids?
Absolutely.
Right? What are the electric bills going to be then? $5,000? What is your rent going to be? $8,000, $9,000 for a 2-bedroom? Come on.
You owe nothing.
So if you don't kind of pull the rug out from these people, guess what? It's not only us that are affected, but we are harboring the sins for future generations, and then they're going to have those sins, right?
Absolutely.
So we have to do something, period.
And what I like to always tell people is make sure to stay angry. And because what ends up happening is these people are very emotionally savvy, right? And it's similar to a PSYOP, and they know that, in the spring months when they are not using heat or, electric too much, they're going to calm down, they're going to get complacent, that we're going to lull them to pacificity. And that's what I want to caution you not to do. Yeah. Because that's what they want you to do. So we need to keep the heat up and
got to keep the pressure on, right?
It. And I know, and I'm sorry, it's exhausting. And I can understand. I can imagine somebody watching me scream on the site there and like, this guy, I need to put it on TikTok or something. I got to listen to something else. I got to put it on some, Ellen DeGeneres or something. But I can understand how emotionally exhausting it is, and I understand that. But it's either we suffer now for a greater end, or we suffer to the point of no return. Because we're going to suffer. You're going to pay the piper now, or you're going to really pay the piper then.
100%.
And at this point, we still are able to do some things that hasn't been fully implemented. Okay, but when they kill all the gas and everything's all electric, and you have no choice in your supplier, and you have no choice in what type of means of energy you use, there'll be absolutely nothing you can do. You'll be lucky to even have a house to turn the light on or turn the heat on, because that's where we're headed. And it's like I said,
it's just complacency.
Well, and like I said, I understand. We're humans. We want to feel all the emotions. We want to be happy. We want to, we want the adrenaline. We want the norepinephrine. We want the serotonin. We want the dopamine. We want all those good emotions. We're human. We feel. This plane of existence is based on emotions. When we chase these emotions, we want to buy the fancy cars so we can feel the happiness and the joy. We all want to feel those, and there is a time and a place for those. And unfortunately, they've made Massachusetts a battleground, and we're in a war right now, and it's an unseen war that needs to be brought to the forefront, because ultimately, the finality of this war is going to determine whether we get to exist or not. So our very existence is threatened, our very survival. This is a mass level extinction event, and what's at stake here is your financial sovereignty and your children's sovereignty and your grandchildren's sovereignty, and those all seem like constants that we just believe are going to be there. But if you can read the writing on the wall, 1 + 1 = 2, and 1 + Maura Healey equals ultimate death.
Yeah,
and that's where we're headed.
Yeah, it's really tough, but I will say, just just touching back on the topic of what we're covering, you know, you were saying like you're yelling and stuff, but the fact is there may be another one of you or another one of me that sees this, right? And it's on a completely different topic that we haven't touched on, and they find some levels of an issue with that topic because of the motivation of us, our ability to keep on going even when it's hard, right? And just that level of determination could influence somebody else to say, you know what I mean? Why is this the way that it is? And then they start digging and they start digging and they start digging, and all of a sudden, guess what? They uncovered something, right?
And I call it setting the fire.
There you go.
We lit the first candle.
We are.
That's it.
We got We got flamethrowers. We're not playing with candles anymore. This is we have to be fire starters within our within our own
region. Because who else is going to do? If nobody else is going to pick up that torch and nobody else wants to contribute, at least at this level, then what are we doing? Right?
And it's not that they don't want to.
Not that they don't want to. It's hard.
They don't even have the time to.
They don't have the time to.
We're all just trying to pick up our kids, make food, do the laundry, and
isn't it easier? Speaking of that, like
I'm doing this during my free time.
So here's a good one. Like I always say this is like sometimes, and I want to see if you feel the same way. Prior to like figuring all this stuff out and putting the pieces of the puzzle together and so on and so forth, wasn't life easier? To a point? Before you knew about all this stuff.
We have the saying,
naive,
right?
you mean?
Yeah, being naive.
We have the saying, ignorance is bliss, right? And absolutely, right? I mean, we all want to believe that our governmental systems are there to help us, We're from the government. We're here to help. And that was, by Ronald Reagan there. And so, like I said, I'm glad to be awake. So I want to thank Maura Healey for starting us up here and helping us realize the level of corruption that, is pervasive amongst the legislature and your constituents there. And because now we're awake, and now that we're awake, we're not going to go back to sleep. And by God, there will be change within this situation in one way or another.
I agree with that. And I think this is the catalyst for the change. I think there's no doubt about it. I think we're good. I think we should wrap it up. Did we cover everything?
Yeah, I mean, we covered the majority of it. And like I said, Citizens Against Eversource on Facebook groups. We also have, a plethora of different medias as well. But like I said, the most important thing is to get knowledgeable. If you join the group or watch, Mike's YouTube, the important part is to not only listen, but listen to the information and take it and run. This needs to be a collective effort.
It has to.
And sort of like the way that, crypto is mined. You got a bunch of different miners in different locations, and collectively we can get to the answer of the solution. And so, I can't do everything. She can't do everything. You can't do everything. And so if we talk about, hey, listen, the DPU releases these things on the Eversource site as far as their next petition, feel free to take it upon yourself to go on the Eversource site and say, hey, listen, I'm going to check this every day and see if they put a petition up there, a new one. And if they do, I'm going to report that to the group. And now the hive knows about it. That's how we need to work. We need to work as a hive in unison and have a hive mind. And because that's the only way that we're going to have an advantage, because these people on the other side, they have billions of dollars. They have billions of dollars dedicating to lying to you, dedicated to fooling you, dedicated to conning you. And so, how can we usurp that money? It's by pure raw manpower, by our blood, sweat, and tears. And that's what we need to put forward when we are looking for these answers so that we can further look for the solutions.
You hit the nail on the head, man. This was awesome.
Awesome.
This was awesome. Thank you for coming on, man.
No, I gotta drive like this. I'm mad.
Yeah, no, it's great. People deserve to hear this stuff, right? I mean,
we have more skin. Here's the thing, they have billions of dollars, but we have more skin in the game.
Oh, there are more of us than there are of them,
We can 100%.
There are more of us, and that's the thing,
Yeah.
And like I said, what they do to us, in regards to jacking our rates to unsurvivable levels, it's basically violence. And so what they're telling us is, hey, listen, we're going to impose violence upon you. Not only that, but when you use your democratic means to pass ballot initiatives like they did with question 1 there in the ballot, we're just going to deny it. And so democracy is dead, and we're just going to keep hitting you with violence. And the question is, what are you willing to do about it?
Yeah. Well put. That's it?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. That's a wrap.
Absolutely.